So let's talk due diligence. In North Carolina, we have a process known as the due diligence period when purchasing residential property. If you haven't bought property in North Carolina or haven't purchased in the last several years, you may not have ever heard about this due diligence deposit and due diligence period. As a real estate professional, I often spend more time explaining this somewhat confusing process, almost more than anything else. So let's get into it. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Christina Morris, the realtor in your corner, and I am a residential real estate professional assisting buyers and sellers in the Raleigh-Durham area in North Carolina. I'm affiliated with RE/MAX United, and I love making videos to help buyers and sellers more easily navigate this process. If you find the content helpful, I sure would appreciate a like, and please consider subscribing. It does help the algorithm, and it sure does help me out, and it pushes this information out to other people who might find it helpful. So what's the deal with this due diligence deposit fee? Well, at the time of contract, a buyer will offer a seller a non-refundable deposit in order for them to take their home off the market. This fee is paid directly to the seller, but it is credited to the buyer at time of closing. This is not a mandatory fee, but it is customary, and the amount is negotiated between the buyer and the seller. The concept of a non-refundable deposit can be quite disturbing to a buyer. You've scrimped and you've saved, and now you have to put up your hard-earned money in order to get the seller to accept your offer. So let's talk about what that due diligence fee gets you. The due diligence fee does three things. It shows the seller how serious a buyer is in closing the transaction, giving them a bit more peace of mind. If they take their home off the market, then this buyer is most likely to close the deal. Number two, it provides the buyer time and opportunity to do the inspections and the ability to walk away for any reason or no reason at all. And number three, it helps to compensate the seller for lost time and opportunity to sell the property should the buyer decide to walk away. There is nothing worse than being a seller and you've got a buyer, you're under contract, and then that buyer walks away after 2 or 3 weeks. Now you've not only lost time, but now your property looks a bit tainted. Once both parties have signed the contract, we enter the due diligence period. Now, not all states have this practice, so those moving from outside of North Carolina can find this quite confusing. Once we enter that due diligence period, it's time to get down to the business of appraisals, inspections, and negotiating repairs. It's the job of the buyer's agent to help you navigate the process as well as negotiate repairs. This process can be challenging and stressful at times, but a good buyer's agent is there to make the road as smooth as possible and to get you to that finish line. After inspections, the buyer may ask for repairs to be done at the seller's expense before closing. They may ask for financial concessions at closing or a reduction in the sales price so that the buyer can make repairs themselves after closing, or a combination of the two with repairs and maybe also a financial concession. But one thing to note, the North Carolina contract states that all property is sold in its as-is condition, meaning that a seller does not have to make any repairs. However, in certain circumstances, it may be in the seller's best interest to go ahead and make some repairs because now their property is going to look tainted if that buyer walks away, and future potential buyers may be wondering what's up. As of the taping of this video, we are in a strong seller's market, which means it will be difficult for any buyer to get a seller to agree to repairs. Let's talk a little about that due diligence and contract period. We are simply looking at 2 periods of time on a timeline. The first is the time between the contract signing and the end of due diligence. At the time of contract, the buyer writes a check to the seller for a non-refundable due diligence deposit. That check is written directly to the seller and it is theirs to keep. A second check, called earnest money, is also written at the time of contract and is placed in escrow with the buyer's attorney or the listing firm. The period of time for due diligence is negotiated, and it's usually between 2 and 4 weeks. During this time, the buyer will conduct inspections, get an appraisal. The inspections can include a general inspection, pest inspection, wood destroying insect, radon, and any other inspection they see fit. The buyer's agent will assist and advise which inspections should be performed, and an appraisal and survey will also be ordered as well. All inspections should be completed and repairs negotiated before 5 p.m. on the due diligence date. And let me repeat, before 5 p.m. on the end of due diligence. Should the buyer decide they do not want to complete this transaction, they will forfeit their due diligence deposit and would need to notify the seller in writing before 5 p.m. on the end of due diligence. If the buyer walks away after the due diligence date, they would lose their earnest money as well. To get through due diligence with as little stress as possible, you need to understand the process. You also need to understand what money is at stake and when, and what your options are at each stage of the process. The next question I am always asked by my buyer and seller clients is, how much is that due diligence fee and earnest money fee? Well, those fees are both negotiable between the buyer and the seller. Right now, with our competitive market and our lack of inventory, we are seeing some extremely high and crazy due diligence fees here in 2021. Those fees are dependent on a number of factors: the condition of the home, the price of the home, are there multiple offers, is there a lot of interest in the home, as well as the buyer's confidence in that property, as well as their comfort level. My firm has seen fees as high as $10, $20, $50, and even up to $80,000. To put this in perspective, it was customary to see about 1% of the purchase price, but right now that thinking is out the window. Your buyer's agent will make recommendations based on their knowledge of the market, location, and condition of the home. But ultimately, this decision is yours. It's your money and your offer to make. I hope I've made this somewhat confusing process a little bit more simple and understandable. If you have any other questions, as always, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to discuss this subject as well as any other real estate question you may have. And if you found the content helpful, I sure would appreciate that like, and if you'd consider subscribing or sharing with your friends. Next week, I'll put out another video. I'll be beginning a series on new construction in the Triangle. So until then, I hope everyone has a great and wonderful day.